Hello and welcome back to Kev's Vintage Tractor Repair channel. If you remember from the previous episode, we were taking parts off the 23C engine and sort of having a little discussion about it. And this is a continuation on from that video. Hope you enjoy. Next thing is our thermostat housing, okay, which is obviously connected to the head. So we've got 2 half-inch bolts again, and then 6 under here. So you got 1 at the top, 3 at the, well, obviously 3 at the top, 3 at the bottom. And we'll undo that and take that unit off as well. First of all, okay, we've got this elbow here, all right, which obviously this one goes to the top part of your radiator, and obviously where the thermostat sits. Undo this. That's them ones out, and out that comes. Right, so that's obviously the elbow, and if we had thermostat, it would be sitting in there, where at some point in its life they've done away with the thermostat. Also, this stuff, silicone. Lots and lots of people use this. All right, it does a job. Normally the best place for that is in the bin, because what can happen, you put too much on, these little bits break off, go inside, and can get jammed up in the waterways and stop the flow of water around the engine. People also use it on the oil side. Now, I had a Ferguson TEF not so long ago, diesel. It couldn't get oil up to the top end of the engine. So we pulled it apart, and in the end we found bits of silicone blocking the oil way up to the top part of the engine. I'll show you what I use. It's called Permatex aviation sealant. Smear it on, and if it goes into the water or it goes into the oil way, it dissolves. And on the outside, rather than making a mess with all that sort of stuff, bit of brake cleaner, wipe it off, and it looks nice and neat. Well, as we move on, rebuilding the engine, we'll talk about that. So next thing, we've got our 6 half inches underneath. There it comes. That's another one out. So I'll just walk around the other side so I can get to the last one. There it comes. I'm not going to hit it really hard, just give it a little tap just to break the sealant and the old gasket. There's the other side, a bit of corrosion in there. Okay, and then we can actually see inside the water jacket of our cylinder head. Here is our thermostat housing, still a Ferguson tractor. So those of you who have got the TE series of Ferguson tractor, the thermostat housing is made out of aluminium. Obviously, over the years, water, aluminium, obviously steel onto aluminium, you get corrosion, and they do tend to rot away in there. Okay, but when they brought this engine out, the 23C, they made these out of cast. I have over here a very similar one. All right, this one's off the 20C TEF diesel, and as we can see in there how pitted that is, and it's very, very thin, ready to sort of leak. So on this customer's tractor, I'm going to replace this part, but obviously it's nearly 70 years old, so I think it's done its time. So our last bit we're going to remove, intake manifold, okay, which is obviously where the engine drawing in air, obviously goes into the chambers, and obviously our exhaust manifold as well. All right, so some of you might notice this piece on here. It's actually a heater plug for when you want to sort of heat it up, and a small squirt of diesel will go onto the element inside and get drawn into the engine to help with starting. Start underneath, and we'll get some of these off. And I don't know if you can see it with the camera. Just under here, we can actually see there's a date, obviously, when this engine block was cast, which to me looks like the 2nd of the 4th, 1957. Another way it's up maybe dating the tractor as well. There are other caster numbers around. We could probably go by the engine number, which is on there, or some of the caster numbers on the rest of the tractor. When we get to it, we're going to be removing those core plugs anyway, which we might do on the next episode. So first of all, we'll carry on undoing all these. Let this side. Sometimes when you're taking these out, the stud will come out as well. Don't worry about it. Okay, so what we can always do, we can always put this into the vise, hold it nice and tight, and we can get the nut off as well. So if it comes out, it's not to worry. We just just carry on, and we'll deal with that as we get around to it. Okay, nice thing with these Fergusons, we've got these on top of the rocker cover here. We've got these tags on here. This one will give you valve clearance gaps when you have to obviously adjust the valves, or the tappets, sorry, get the words out. Off the top of my head, I think it's 10 and 12 inlet and exhaust, but it's a shame they're painted over, so they're quite nice to see on there. Obviously when I paint it, we'll make sure we can see all those little details. Now, also, to help date our tractor as well, on some of these, there's another date code or date cast into the cylinder head. On this one, it's 15th of the 4th, 57, where on our block was 2nd of the 4th, 57. So I think within a bit we can say these were cast in April of 57. Obviously the engine is, and obviously we'll look at the rest of the tractor when we get to that point as well. We keep finding evidence that it was definitely a golden grey. Obviously on the manifold inlet manifold, there's more gold in there. So it's going to be nice to paint this one back to its original colours. So we're nearly there. There we go, another one came out. Let's say, don't worry about it. It happens. So it's only going to come so far because we've still got our inlet manifold on, which is obviously these two underneath. Last one. And then off that one comes. We'll see, so there's our intake manifold, made out of aluminium, so I'll obviously give that a good clean, and then we'll use that again. And I think what I'm going to have to do is just take this breather pipe off, which is obviously a little 1/2 inch underneath there. So I'll just quickly whip that off. So this one's only held down by the top, so it's the breather pipe for the top of the engine. And that's generally just pushed in there. Sometimes you'll get a Jubilee clip around that hole and that. And then right down the bottom on the sump, it's one of the sump bolts, which obviously hold that in there. But we're not taking the sump off, so I'm just going to put that back in there. So I've got that. So give that a wiggle. And there is the breather pipe. Our exhaust manifold. We can see, here's our exhaust, pretty carboned up, okay, and obviously our inlets as well, which really need to be cleaned, but we can see how much dirt and muck has been drawn through. They're all a little bit wet, especially number 2 cylinder on the inlet side, very wet. Okay, all the way through to number 4, but we'll talk more about what's happening in there when we get to that bit. That's the end of this episode. All right, so quick recap. We've removed the fuel lines off the injector side, the lift pump. I haven't removed the injectors yet. All right, I'm gonna do that when we do the pump. All right, so they're not laying about, I can lay everything together. On the front of the engine, we removed the dynamo and the water pump. And obviously on this side, we've removed the manifolds. All right, and we can see they're a bit manky in there. And we just pointed out a few different bits and pieces along the way, things you can sort of look for. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer you, and I hope to see you next time.